Starting a cargo airline can require tens of millions of dollars before the first aircraft carries a single commercial shipment. And if you want to build a serious operation with multiple freighters, the investment can quickly climb beyond $100 million. A single converted Boeing 767 freighter can cost roughly $30 million to $50 million all in, depending on the aircraft and conversion, while a new build freighter can cost well over $100 million. So where does all this money go? How much does it cost to actually operate the airline? And most importantly, how long does it take before the owner begins making real money? Welcome to Ray Mapp's Profit Lab, where we break down the money behind some of the world's biggest businesses. If you enjoy documentaries that explain how businesses actually make and spend their money, subscribe to the channel, because today we are going inside one of the most expensive businesses you can own, a cargo airline. The first decision is the aircraft, because this single choice can determine whether the business starts with tens of millions of dollars or hundreds of millions. One of the more practical approaches for a new cargo operator is to buy an older passenger aircraft and convert it into a freighter. A Boeing 767-300ER, for example, can be acquired as a used aircraft and then converted for cargo operations. Industry estimates put the donor aircraft and conversion together in a broad range of roughly $30 million to $50 million, depending heavily on the age, condition, conversion program, and modifications. One industry comparison put a 16-year-old 767 at about $11 million and the conversion at about $15.9 million, or approximately $26.9 million before other costs. Now compare that with buying a new freighter. A new Boeing 767-300F has been listed around $220 million, although list prices are not necessarily what an airline actually pays in a commercial transaction. A large Boeing 777 freighter can also represent well over $100 million in aircraft value, with market-level prices for new 777-200FS having been estimated around $148 million to $175 million. For a startup, this is why buying used aircraft and converting them can be financially attractive. But buying the aircraft is only the beginning. Before your aircraft can start generating revenue, you need to create an airline around it. You need regulatory certification, qualified management, pilots, maintenance arrangements, operational manuals, safety systems, dispatch, cargo handling procedures, insurance and compliance systems. The exact requirements depend on the country where the airline is based, but operating an airline requires regulatory approval before commercial operations can begin. And this stage can consume millions of dollars before the airline earns its first dollar from cargo. Then you need somewhere to operate. You may need offices, a maintenance base or hangar arrangements, ground support equipment, cargo handling equipment, computers, and operational systems. You may not need to own every facility yourself, because many airlines outsource portions of maintenance and ground handling, but outsourcing does not make those services free. Then comes one of the most dangerous expenses, working capital. A new cargo airline cannot simply spend every dollar it has on an aircraft. You need cash remaining after the aircraft arrives, because your first customers may not pay immediately, while your expenses continue every day. Fuel has to be purchased. Employees have to be paid. Aircraft leases or financing payments have to be made. Insurance has to be paid. Airport and navigation charges continue. Maintenance bills continue. And the aircraft still has to fly even when revenue is temporarily lower than expected. This is why I would not think of a $30 million converted freighter as a $30 million business. If you spent $30 million on the aircraft and had almost nothing left in the bank, you could own an airplane but still have an airline that is financially incapable of surviving. A more realistic way to think about the capital requirement is this. If you build a lean operation around one converted freighter, the aircraft itself might consume tens of millions of dollars, while certification, setup, deposits, insurance, personnel, equipment, and working capital can push the total funding requirement substantially higher. And if you want 3 aircraft instead of 1, the mathematics changes very quickly. 3 converted 767s at, for example, $35 million each would represent about $105 million just for the aircraft investment. At $50 million each, that becomes $150 million. And you still haven't paid for the entire airline infrastructure. This is why serious cargo aviation is a business for investors with substantial capital. Now let's talk about the expense that keeps the aircraft moving: fuel. Fuel is one of the largest operating expenses in aviation. IATA's 2026 annual review says labor represented about 26% of airline operating expenses in 2025, while fuel costs provided some relief as jet fuel prices declined during the year. For a cargo airline, fuel costs become especially important because a freighter can spend many hours in the air carrying tens of tons of cargo. Every flight, therefore, becomes a financial calculation. Suppose an aircraft is scheduled to fly internationally. The airline has to estimate how much cargo it will carry, how much fuel the flight will require, the airport and navigation charges, crew costs, handling charges, maintenance reserves, and other expenses. Then it asks one question: will the money collected from the cargo exceed the cost of operating the flight? If the answer is no, flying the aircraft simply creates a bigger loss. And this is where cargo pricing becomes critical. Cargo airlines can make money from freight forwarders, logistics companies, manufacturers, e-commerce companies, pharmaceutical companies, and other businesses that need goods transported quickly. Unlike passengers, cargo is generally sold according to factors such as weight, volume, distance, urgency, and the type of goods being transported. A large aircraft can carry a huge amount of cargo, but carrying capacity is useless if there isn't enough paying freight. An empty seat on a passenger aircraft is lost revenue. An empty cargo position is also lost revenue. But there is an additional problem with cargo aircraft. The aircraft can be full in one direction and relatively empty on the return journey. Imagine your aircraft carries 50 tons of valuable goods from one continent to another. The flight generates strong revenue. But then demand on the return route is weak, and the aircraft returns with only 15 tons. You still have to pay for the fuel, crew, airport charges, maintenance, and other operating costs. This is why experienced cargo airlines study global trade flows before opening routes. They want to know where goods are manufactured, where they are consumed, when demand peaks, and whether they can fill the aircraft in both directions. And this leads to the most important part of the business: revenue. Let's say, purely as an illustration, that a cargo aircraft generates $25 million in annual revenue. That sounds enormous, but the airline does not keep $25 million. From that revenue come fuel, salaries, maintenance, insurance, aircraft ownership or lease costs, airport charges, ground handling, navigation, administration, financing, and other expenses. After everything is paid, the remaining amount is the actual profit. And this is where the economics of aviation become surprising. The global airline industry is expected to generate enormous revenues, but IATA's 2025 outlook projected a net profit margin of only about 3.7%. At a 3.7% net margin, a company generating $100 million in revenue would theoretically retain about $3.7 million as net profit. That means the cargo airline owner cannot simply ask, "How much revenue can I generate?" The more important question is, how much profit remains after every cost has been paid? And now we can estimate the journey toward profitability. Suppose an entrepreneur invests around $70 million into a lean one-aircraft cargo operation, including the aircraft and the capital needed to get the business operational. The actual amount could be significantly lower or much higher depending on the aircraft, country, financing structure, and business model. If the company eventually generates $20 million in annual revenue, but only produces a 5% net margin, that is about $1 million in annual profit. At that level, recovering $70 million of initial investment purely from profits would take decades. But that is why aircraft financing, leasing, contracts, fleet utilization, and business scale are so important. A cargo airline is not normally designed to recover its entire aircraft purchase price from accounting profit in a few years. The aircraft itself is an asset. The company can finance it, lease it, refinance it, sell it later, or use its value as part of its overall capital structure. And when the airline grows from one aircraft to 5, 10, or 20 aircraft, its revenue potential grows dramatically, but so do its expenses and financial risks. This is why cargo aviation is ultimately a game of scale. The goal is not simply to own an airplane. The goal is to keep that airplane productive, keep its cargo holds full, Minimize empty return flights, secure long-term customers, control fuel and maintenance costs, and generate enough cash flow to finance the next aircraft. A successful cargo airline, therefore, becomes much more than an aircraft owner. It becomes a logistics company with wings. And the final lesson is perhaps the most important one. If you have $30 million, you may be able to acquire a cargo aircraft. But owning the aircraft does not mean you own a profitable cargo airline. You need millions more for operations, certification, people, maintenance, insurance, facilities, and working capital. If you want a small but credible fleet, you could quickly be looking at well over $100 million. And if you want to compete with the world's largest cargo operators, the numbers can move into the hundreds of millions or even billions. That is the economics of owning a cargo airline. The airplane is only the beginning. The real business is turning an extremely expensive machine into a constantly moving revenue-producing asset and making sure that, after millions of dollars pass through the business every year, there is still enough money left at the end to call it a profit.